Hey guys, I just want to let you know that this video is only on the North Sea, Baltic Sea, and the Atlantic, and I will do a separate video for the Mediterranean. Okay, and we're going to continue on with the Dark Ages. Good morning, evening, and afternoon. This is Rex. We're going to talk about medieval naval warfare from the late Roman Empire to the height of the 80 Years' War and wars of religion in Renaissance Europe and beginning the Baroque period. So the significance is piracy and group migration was a prime factor in creating modern nations such as the Anglo-Saxon invasion of England, and the development of the longship created the Viking Age, especially due to increased movement and speed. The Hanseatic League was evolved the longship, the canal, to the Kog, the Hulk, and the Krabbe. The North Sea, Baltic Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean saw mostly sailing ships and rarely did ramming maneuvers. This clinker design of the ships versus Mortise and Tenon, which is more of a Mediterranean build, was first encountered by the Romans at Battle Morte Bombay of the Veneti, what's called a pontoon. This is their type of sailing ship, which is unable to be rammed and relied on wind. In fact, warfare in the North Sea relied on more aggressive winds, and by the Renaissance, larger sailing ships with advanced gun decks were used, often with 3 sails and a sprit sail combining square sail with a lateen sail to increase displacement and speed. I'd like to start with our first ship, and that is the Naval Busoria, which had 30 oars and a keel. It was not designed for naval combat. It was just transit legionaries and auxilia throughout Gaul, Germania, and Britannia around the 3rd century. And this is the same time where the trireme was phased out towards the Naval Busoria, and the Durham by Remus. Durham by Remus is used in the Mediterranean, which is basically a bireme, and they got rid of the ram and replaced it with a spur. And if you don't know that, basically a ram is supposed to sink a vessel, whereas a spur is to pin a vessel and allow your marines to board the enemy vessel. So to give you some perspective of who the Romans were facing against, they were facing against the Gauls, which had the Carrot. And this, like a Carrot shows painted sides, or their tarred sides of hide, and the frames were attached to the cross frame. Celtic warriors, fishermen, monks, and pirates traveled via this preferred boat due to the low wood that existed in that region of Britannia. And sometimes skin and sails were painted light blue as camouflage when raiding the British coastline. And on the other side, you have the Slavs were using dugouts very heavily throughout that period. And they don't really use longships until around the 10th century or the 9th century. The archaeological evidence shows they can hold several men. They fell very large pine trees during the winter, and then started the construction during the spring. And the Byzantines, or the Eastern Roman Empire, called them Mnochida, which means dugout. And Constantine Porphyrogentius of the Amministrato d'Imperio in the 10th century described the Russians and their type of dugouts as with sails and rudders, which sailed from Russia to Constantinople. So they hollowed theirs out with an adze, and they heated them up to expand them, and these were taken for the Dnieper River in the spring. And Oleg of Kiev invaded Thrace and Constantinople with 2,000 of these, so you'd expect maybe about 10,000 men and even wheeled them inland to raid Constantinople. On the flip side, you look at Czech Republic and Poland, and they even tied these dugouts together to make rafts, and these could hold about 1.5 tons. And these were about 1 meter wide and 10 meters long from oak. And the radiocarbon analysis from one specimen of that oak tree was felled in 281 BCE. Another specimen showed from 10 to 12th century BCE, so that's about at least 1,300 years of usage within Central and Eastern Europe. So I first want to talk about the first plank boats that had come out of Germany, and they might have come earlier, but we do know they came in the fall of the Roman Empire, or the late Roman Empire, and especially two of their greatest archaeological excavations are the Knighton boat and the Sutton Hoo boat. So the Knighton boat is the first clinker boat to exist in the late Roman period, which had a large oak plank vice keel at the bottom. It's a primitive oarlocks and a steering rudder is propelled by 30 oars. There's no evidence a mast was used. However, actually I won't say however. The Sutton Hoo ship in East Anglia, which was used by the Angles, parallels and mimics the Knighton ship because those peoples were very close knit. And while having used to access these warriors across the North Sea, these boats were more likely to transit along the coast. But I wouldn't say they had a true keel. The keel is more of a gigantic oak plank that provides that structural support, although it is clinker built. And the Cavalso on the ship, it actually introduces a true keel into the boat. And this happens more in the 7th century. The first longships were large and had transition, and you start seeing that too more with the Osberg ship and the Gokstad ship. So the Cavalsund ship was built around 700 on the Common Era, 18 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 20 centimeters deep. It did not have a true keel like the Osberg and Sutton Hoo. The first longships were large and had a transition from boats like the Knighton ship and the Sutton Hoo ship to longboats like the Osberg ship and the Gokstad ship. And the Cavalsund ship was the missing link. It was built around 700 CE, 18 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 80 centimeters deep. It did not have a true keel, but its plank was deep enough to act as a virtual rudder. It also had a fixed steerboard, and the arrangement allowed it to turn on its own longitudinal axis. And the most common ship that existed during the so-called Viking Age was the Karavi. And the Karavi could be used as a trading ship, a warship, and even a coastal pleasure craft. There was a true keel, which was the base held together by strakes, and this lap strake was fastened diagonal to a vertical lead by a Meganhufer. The keelson was established to hold the mast in place after the ribs and the crossbeams were established. Recent replication so that ships can reach to 15 knots, so that's 15 knots, with a good breeze, and 5 knots by rowing. And one of the pictures that showed is the Battle of Hafersfjord in 872 Common Era. And this shows how using the forward and aft ends of the boat were used as vantage points to either defend or attack the enemy ship. So the Battle of Hafersfjord was critical for the unification of Norway under Harald Fairhair. Boarding actions were well known, such as Onur Trifut defending himself against the Ulfenhandler, which are basically the berserkers. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it Ulfhednar. Boarding was the main battle tactic, and the most honorable warriors would lead from the battleship. So Snorri Sturluson, which is a historian, accounted for the King Harald Fairhair defeating the host of Norway and kings. So this is what he wrote: Erik, king of Hordaland, Sorke, king of Rogaland, and his brother Earl Sote, Hjotve of the Rich, king of the Oder, and his son Thor Haklang, and from Fidelmark, 2 brothers, Rolig and Had the Hard. And what he's accounting for are all the forces that were used in this battle, because a lot of this leadership, you're not having a distinct admiral, you're having a series of different jarls and kings or koninger. The term would be called koninger, which is a warlord that would be a general and an admiral hosting these warships. So the Kanar was developed in the 9th century. This was strictly a trading ship which had an oak keel. The Skuvdelev find was 16.3 meters in length and 4.5 meters long. Its keel was 12.1 meters long, and it was wide to hold cargo, and it improved around 5 to 6 knots. No surprise that the cog is around the same speed. It's about 4.3 to 6.2 knots. Just because it's developed almost the same way. So, at this time, towards the 11th century, you start seeing the development of military admiralty, military chain of commands. And so I already mentioned that the Norse fleets had often had general and an admiral, so like a koninger. But yeah, Middle Ages and Northern European navies often developed organized fleets, much slower pace compared to the Arabs or the French or the Italians or the Greeks. And what I mean by the Greeks, I mean the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire. But the Hanseatic League had localized commands, and this is based on their city-states like Lubeck. And the ship's captain was called a schiffer, or a schieper, and his first mate was called a setschiefer, or a schiffsführer. And each city would elect its own admiral, and sometimes the mayor of the town, such in this case Warendorp of Lubeck, or the city councilor Simon of Utrecht, had been elected admirals for their city. And later on, the ships had a marine detachment called Fondane. On the other side of the North Sea, England was developing its own navy, following Henry II, King of England. So he granted charter to Hastings, Hythe, Romney, Sandwich, and Dover, calling it the Cinque-Port, which had trade concessions as long as they provided a navy to England. And many times they did this with arrested shipping, through piracy, or by giving these ships the captain a certain payment plan for loaning their ships out to the